let's dissect the real reason you're exhausted at work. And no, probably not because you hate your job. It may not be due to you being lazy. It's actually something that I myself have never thought about and only realized all recently. And perhaps that's the same for you. That's today's discussion, which is energy. Is it the fact that you're getting drained at work because of the way your energy is being managed through the day? I can certainly speak for this as somebody who has started the corporate sphere working through first what started as COVID and then being mandated to come into the office. The difference between the two working styles was night and day. And let me tell you, the biggest factor that I've found between both of these is how I've been managing my energy. So stick around if you want to know exactly how to do the same thing in your life. The results will speak for itself. So the way we're going to break this down is into three very practical areas, and that includes your energy drainers, your energy boosters, and then how do you bring the two together and implement it into your routine. Now, it's actually a lot more simple than you think. It's just about how you identify the buckets that fall in this, and that's what I'm going to talk about. But first, I want to bring you through into a journey that perhaps you've also gone through for yourself as well. So, for context, I'm now working more than 4 years in the corporate space as a full-time consultant, and one of the biggest things that has impacted this journey for me was, as I mentioned, the fact that I started in COVID. And so a lot of things that I thought was actually normal turns out is not actually very normal when you're working in the office. Things that I took for granted, like being able to just kind of squeeze my wake ups till the last minute before meetings, taking the cheeky nap here and there, going to the kitchen to grab a bite. And let's not kid ourselves. I know that you were one of those people shaking your mouse when you needed to. Uh, there's so many things that I think we just took for granted. Now, obviously, there's a lot of things that I say are not necessarily good practice anyway. So there are some key things that I've now noticed going into the office. By the time I come to the end of the day, I just feel exhausted, right? And I then think about all the interactions that have happened throughout that day, and it makes so much sense as to why my energy is pretty much depleted. And as somebody who's more introverted, what I would typically want to do is not equating to what I actually get to do in the office. So by the time I come home, I'm gassed. All I want to do is go home, go to my room, stay in there, just like go on the laptop, whatever, have my dinner and knock out for the day. But the problem with that is that I'm coming home to my family where I'm not actually able to even bring my best self. And I think your best self should truly be with your family. And if that's because of the energy sucks that are occurring to work, then I needed to think about how am I going to then change this. So there's really three buckets where this all falls into. There's the physical element, the mental, and the emotional. So when we're looking at drainers, when we're thinking about physical drainers, the first thing that comes to mind for me is going to be being stuck on the desk all day and really having not much movement throughout the day, which is going to negatively impact my posture, and I'm therefore not really taking the breaks that I need to be. And as I said, it can be kind of daunting when you've got senior managers kind of looking over your shoulder head, especially those that are probably more micromanagey that you may not have been so used to when you work from home. That is one of the drainers that can be the case. The other one could be something like excess screen time and looking at the screen too long as well. So when we say physical drainers, just think of what's actually external that's impacting us. Then I look at the mental, so that's internal, right? And those things could be things like getting decision fatigue, from having to make decisions between multiple different options. There could be things like over-analysis. So, before I might jump on a call or even after, I'll be overthinking about what I said or what I needed to say. And then that can start to drain your energy. Task switching, especially with the likes of Teams. Now, that was already some sort of a distraction, you could say, when you get messages. But now you go into the office and then you've got people coming to your desk as well on top of replying to things. There's a lot going on and it's probably impacting you more than you actually realize. So that's what we talk about mental. Finally, emotional. So this is about how you feel, right? And what are those drainers that are changing the way that you feel. So things like your social interactions in the office, things like having to attend particular events when you didn't necessarily want to, or hanging out at the lunchroom for group lunches with people you don't necessarily want to, or you just didn't want to have lunch with people that day. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but instead you just wanted to have your chill time, go a walk around the block, or watch your TikToks or whatever it might be for the day. So those are things that will change the way that you feel. That's really important to drill down. What do those buckets look like for you? And what I'd suggest, even in literally the next 24 hours, is to just write that down. What do you think the energy drainers are for you, and draw a pattern, because what you'll notice is that this will then feed into the next two elements. Now that leads me on to number two, which is your energy boosters. Now, this is really what's going to elevate you. And then as somebody who myself is introverted, and perhaps other people are as well, is who I can particularly talk to, we think that the best thing to do is to just recharge in isolation. Now, although there's nothing wrong with doing that, you're much better off finding a balance of doing your me time while still getting a balance of engagement in your day. So it's about prioritizing and balancing the two. And when we come back to then thinking about your three buckets, we start with your physical boosters. One of the biggest unlocks for me was that, when I was coming from days where I was just feeling so depleted from the office in comparison to days that I was actually at home. And what probably changed was that I started to actually implement more of a routine with my physical exercise. I was staying more consistent with the gym. I would sometimes do that before work. That might be things like hitting the weights, going for a run, even now more recently having picked up kickboxing. These are all things that calibrate your physical energy. Whether you do it on the day or whether you even do it on your off days, these are things that will just carry over. And that's really what fills my cup from a physical element. And I think personally for me, that energy booster is probably one of the strongest ones. But it could even be things like drinking coffee. Now, we don't need to berate coffee. I love coffee, right? But it's about how you maybe play it more strategically. You're not going to be wanting to have a coffee, at 5 p.m. maybe just before you've clocked off for work, but it could be just, having it when you get into the office and then having another one at lunch, whatever it might be. These are physical things that elevate your energy. And that is what we talk about when we're looking at the physical kind of boosters. The mental boosters are again what's going to make us feel better internally. So I think a really good example for this could be blocking out time on your calendar. Uh, Cal Newport talks about a concept of deep work, where essentially you block out some time, let's say an hour, where it's just dedicated to a particular stream of work with no distractions. So it's on your calendar. If anybody comes, you've got your headphones in and you're locked in to just get it done. And you'll be amazed at how much better you feel by just having completed that, compared to all the distractions that you're getting between task switching and responding to people when you stick to the one thing. Other things could be like finding creative outlets to boost your energy. Things like listening to music, journaling, or jotting down things that need to be done. These are all things that can kind of just like help you feel a little bit more grounded. And I found that that really does help with my mental energy. Now, the last thing is your emotional boosters. And it kind of ties into the drainers too, because if we think about it, right, there's nothing wrong with socializing. And I don't want to demonize that even for people that might be a little bit more closed in, because I can almost guarantee you that when you do have an interaction with someone that was intentional, somebody that you cared about, let's say a one-on-one discussion, you're always going to leave that chat feeling good about yourself, especially if it's somebody that you care about. So I think that's where it's important to try and identify those outlets and to actually, hang out with people that you care about. But it doesn't necessarily need to be in these forced environments with groups of people that maybe you don't want to. It's about intentionality. The same goes for when you want to take those breaks to reset your mind it will then maybe it will also reset the way that you feel about things just by being able to be honest and take a walk around the block rather than feeling like you need to hide it. I mean, that's more commonly accepted in today's, in today's environment around the priority around mental health. So that last one can tie into almost all three of these areas. And finally, that brings us on to number three. And this is about how you implement reducing the drainers and elevating the boosters into a plan where you don't necessarily feel like you're guilty. And I think for me, the important thing was that yes, things are kind of scheduled in my day that I probably don't have any control over some of the time, but it's about how you adapt and find ways to make it work. So let's go back to our three buckets, right? Your physical. Ways to reduce your physical drainers could be things like taking walking meetings when you can. Now, I know that's probably more relevant when you're at home, but there are ways to be smart about this even when you're catching up with people. So that's definitely one way to do it. Another one can be things like noise cancelling headphones. I will admit that that's sometimes the best way to just shut out the noise and focus on what you need to do. And I did even mention that earlier with some of the deep work stuff. So that's also a good one. And another one can be things like a screen detox. So for me, on my iPhone, I have a setting where when I get to the office, it changes to a specific focus mode where it's for work. And that kind of signals to my brain, okay, like we're at work, we're here to just try and crank out what we need to. And then hopefully by the afternoon, I've kind of done a lot of the things that I needed to do and I don't necessarily need to keep it on that mode. That obviously will depend on the day. For you, it's important to identify what are those physical sort of boosters or drainers that you can kind of weave and embed into your schedule and not necessarily feel like you need to make everybody's lives harder, particularly for somebody where I can probably relate where you don't necessarily have all the power to do these things at the start of your career. Number two, streamline your mental drainers or boosters, right? Find a way to weave it in together. So things like batching meetings, using the deep work as another example, or rather than having to fire off all these messages all at once, sometimes all it takes is just to get on a call with somebody. Or it's about being strategic about when you are going to go into the office, about making the most of those interactions so that you've boosted your cup, you've then made your peers and your leaders feel like they're valued. And then when you go home, you've done the heavy lifting and you can then prioritize more on yourself and some of the more admin tasks that you can just kind of crank out. Number three is around the emotional baggage that we sometimes carry. And what I want to say here is to just normalize this. And it's really not that bad to feel guilty when you just say no to somebody about wanting to get on a particular call or when you're getting certain work. Sometimes it's okay as long as you provide that justification. It's the same thing with going into certain group lunches or meetings. Sometimes it's just being honest, hey, I've got to take an important call for the family, or I'm actually doing this fitness challenge and I need to take a walk around the block. There's things like that that you can do. Or at the very least, if you are going to be going into interactions where you don't necessarily feel recharged from, but you kind of have to, just being okay to take a solo reset, whether it's just 10 minutes beforehand to just declutter your mind and then you can bring your best self into these interactions. I think the key thing with the emotional component is that we need to recognize how we're actually feeling and then bring in the physical and mental components into your plan as well. It will make a world of difference. So I've talked about many different facets and that's just something that you can take as an example, but by all means, really spend the time with yourself, like I suggest in the next 24 hours, to just come up with what these look like for you. And then let's make it a plan for you in the next 7 days to just identify what are the big ticket one or two items in each of the physical, mental, and emotional things that you're going to change and track that over the next 7 days and see how you feel. Let me know in the comments what's the biggest drainer or booster that you've identified and how are you going to elevate that into your ongoing plan. Because I'm telling you, for me, I actually thought that I maybe just hated my job. And to some degree, there's been times where I've done work where I was probably questioning that. No doubt about it, right? But whether you're in that situation or not, I think the biggest thing that really helps is to take some ownership and identify how can you make your life easier, because for a lot of people it's not that easy to just quit their job, and you do need to actually develop those skills and prove yourself to get the recognition that you deserve. We all owe it to ourselves that these are all small little hacks that can go a long way. So I hope you like this video, and I'll see you in the next one.